So good morning, everyone. It's morning. Um, and I know we have now have other things on our mind, particularly Delta. But the purpose of this video is to go over the Moral Classroom project. I really had hoped to do this last week, but I was in training for 3 days and had to then went to a conference on Friday. So I'm getting to it today, and hopefully everyone will have time. So the due date is probably somewhat moot at this point. So get it in when you can get it in. Not only because of the lateness of the new video, and again, I apologize to those who tried to access the old videos. And once again, I'll repeat that we apparently our license expired. No one let me know. I'd hoped to get through this semester with some of those. I did, I was able to do some new ones. So I think the only thing I have left to do, which hopefully I can get done within the next week. I'm not sure where. Right now, I'm not sure if we're actually staying in Baton Rouge. We may go down to my mom's, near Destrehan. I also have a room booked in Marshall, Texas, just in case. But anyway, but unfortunately, the storm seems to have picked up speed and it's coming a lot sooner. And so those plans may also be moved. Anyway, so I do wish everyone the best, particularly if you're evacuating at some point before the storm, and stay safe in the highways. And I hope, you and yours were able to stay healthy and safe. Anyway, okay. So the Moral Classroom project obviously is an effort for you to, in some small way, replicate the larger study that you're reading about, particularly for those who've been able to get the book and go beyond part 1, which lays out all the categories, which I'm going to go over. Let me share. I have an outline. One of the problems with losing the Adobe Connect video, and I can't remember if I had an outline on that video or not, is I couldn't access the outline I had and had to recreate one. So the project has 2 parts. It has your observations, and we'll talk about that in a second. And it has has a reflection. And while the observations are important, the observations are mostly important to the degree they inform your reflection. Because the reflection, I think, is the key piece to this project. So let's talk about the observations. So the observation part assumes for anyone that's in a K-12 school or has access to a K-12 school and you're in either K-12 leadership or technology leadership, there may be some exceptions there, elementary or secondary masters, then my hope is that you're able to do observations. The ideal number would be 3. If you're able to get 1 or 2 in, I'll be happy. The problem with just 1, unless you're very familiar with the class, and I really usually urge people not to observe a teacher that they know really well. So when you observe a teacher, you never tell the teacher what you're observing for. You do not tell the teacher that you're trying to observe their moral and ethical practice. Okay? I think that puts undue pressure on the teacher, because you're really not here to, in your observations, you really aren't trying to critique that teacher. That's not the purpose. Okay, you're the purpose. Okay, but you're looking for activity that a teacher may engage in. So if you're able to get 1 or 2 observations in, even a video observation would work. If that is not possible, then, and I'll talk about higher ed in a second. If that's not possible, then what I would like, if you have a video of yourself, maybe do a self-critique. But what I want, if you're not able to do the observation, is at least the reflection. And the reflection is you look at the categories that you've noted in your observation, if you've been able to do that. If not, you have to think about the categories as in light of your own teaching, and you reflect on your own teaching, your own practice. Okay, so the reflection is about you, not the other. Okay, as I said, you're not here to critique someone else. You're really here to critique yourself, but learning from someone else. And you kind of compare your own practice to the practice you're observing, and you do that reflection. Okay. The format is all observations and the reflection should be on a single document. Reflect observation 1, observation 2, etc. Is labeled, as well as the reflection is labeled, and that should come at the end. Okay. So if there are any questions, please email me about the observations and the reflections for higher ed. If you work in higher ed administration or plan to work in higher ed administration, I would like you to observe a university class. Because that's what you're administrating, is university teaching, in a sense, okay? If you're involved in athletics, if you're a trainer, if you're a coach, etc., then, observe the training room, observe someone. I wouldn't observe, if you're a football coach, for instance, I wouldn't observe your practice. I would go to another sport, go to basketball, for instance. I'm not even sure if they're training right now. So you can always, if you want, you could always go observe a high school practice. I don't know how that fits into recruiting, so that could be a violation. So it's complicated. So if you have any, if you have thoughts and questions, please email me. Higher ed folks. The technology folks, if you're not in a K-12 school and you're working on the technology degree, email me and we'll try to figure something out. And I'm very, I'm open to practically anything. This is not trying to be exclusive here in any way, shape, or form. Sorry, I'm still working on my third cup of coffee. Or is it my fourth? I can't remember. Okay. So any questions on those two parts, let me know. That's the nuts and bolts. Okay. Categories. And then there's 8, I think, varied categories. We're going to go over those. Part of it's about the regular curriculum. Part of it is about teacher interactions. And those interactions can be with students. I should also put up with other teachers in the classroom. So interactions with paras, interactions with special ed teachers, et cetera, that are there working with students in your classroom. Ceremonies, rules, rituals, and procedures, gestures, and expressions. So I'm going to stop sharing this. Those are broad, kind of, collapse some of those categories. So I'm going to pull up the printout of part 1 that I shared in Moodle. Okay. So moral instruction. And, I look at this both in terms of moral and ethical. And I argue that good ethical practice within a classroom is good teaching practice. So the first part is direct moral instruction. As the explanation talks about, this is true primarily in religious schools. Some private, non-religious could have some direct moral instruction. So you're not overtly teaching religion. You're not, so, you're not, for the sake of religion, okay? If you teach religion as, the history of the Catholic Church as part of a, world history course, that's not direct moral instruction. So, I'm assuming there are probably some of you in teaching in Catholic schools, so you would probably talk about this. Some of you in some of the other Christian schools. Okay. So that's the first category. Second category is moral instruction within the regular curriculum. So this is where you would teaching about world religions, say in a middle school world history class, or maybe in an American history class, teaching about the First and Second Great Awakening in the United States. And well, in the First Great Awakening would be in the colonies, Second Great Awakening would be in the United States. or the possibility of the efforts of conversion by, say, Spanish and French religious priests in other parts of colonial America. So in there, there are other, there are other areas here. Okay. If you're teaching, as it has shown, you're teaching Martin Luther King. So if you're teaching about people, like King is not necessarily understood as a religious figure. We don't know him because he's a religious figure, yet he was a religious figure. So that would be part of that. So that's, and this could be, I use history examples. This could be part of a science course, particularly maybe in conversations about evolution and creationism. This could be in a English course based on the stories that one may be reading in the presence of religious figures within those stories. And you may, there's a lot of fiction that has a lot of fiction that deals with religious themes indirectly. You may or may not even know that's true. Say Les Mis would be one that deals in Catholic themes, as does The Hobbit. So anything by Tolkien, the Chronicles of Narnia, So those are some ideas. So that's one. So rituals and ceremonies, and I'm going to bring in a little later. They talk about rules and procedures. So rituals and ceremonies are things like Pledge of Allegiance. If there's a public school that has prayer or a moment of silence, still. This book was obviously written in the end of the 70s. They're observing at a time where something like the Our Father, the Lord's Prayer, would have still been said. Anyway. So it could also be ceremonies, pep rallies, and other. I would even put other clubs and organizations in with this. And so there are a lot of, other extramural programs about, say, great figures or about holidays and stuff, time of the year. Okay. Rules, then, and that comes later, is, rules are what, the things that students are asked to do to have a well-managed classrooms, but so are procedures. So procedures are not rules. They are how to act given particular types of practice or strategies you're engaging in. So if you're lecturing, or are they taking notes, or are you doing group work? How is that organized? Transitions, those types of things. Are they following the rules? Okay. visual displays, I think lots of classrooms have them. Quotes about education, about how we treat people, about respect, and all those types of things. Spontaneous interjections. And these are, I'll classify a number of different things. So sorry, I'm moving this up and down. Okay. So you have to, you're going to listen for how teachers react to when students do things, the good or the bad. Okay. So how does that teacher react? Do they react? Not reacting may be inappropriate given certain circumstances. So here, spontaneous interjections is verbal, right? Well done, Johnny, kind of thing. Or the way they criticize Johnny, let's say. But it also, and further down, it talks about like gestures, facial expressions, or you go, oh, I don't know, or you give a wink, or, you frown or smile given certain circumstances. And maybe you, or maybe the teacher, I should say, reacts one way with one group of students, and they may react a different way with another group of students. Okay. And there's also the off, and this is further down, there's also the off statement. And what do I mean by that? Where you say something that you think is innocent, and it is taken differently by a student. And I've had this experience as a coach, where I was saying something to a group of I coached rugby, to a group of players, and I had a new player that didn't understand what I was doing and took offense. And we had to have a sit down. I had to explain to him what I was doing, and that I wasn't trying to disrespect him. It was far from it. Okay. So, but sometimes you can make an off comment. It's not an interjection. It's, or is, is the teacher, how does the teacher touch children, touch students, in any particular way? So those, I think, cover most. We'll talk about the curricular substructure in a second, which is more than practice. That's a fairly long one. And so expressive morality, we just talked about that. And these are very long at the end. I guess that's it. That was number 8. Okay. So let's talk about the substructure of the curriculum. It comes in 2 ways. Okay. It comes in terms of content. I think it comes in terms of practice. So I'm sure you've never thought about the fact that, in fact, how we teach science or how we teach math may have ethical and moral overtones. Just the idea of, in math, of something equals something else has I would argue, has an ethical overtone. Or even the concept of infinity, which is closely related to the concept of the eternal, has some moral and ethical overtones. And depends on how you treat that. So, that's, and, sometimes, the basic ways we approach science, or let's say other types of research tools, particularly when they deal with the personal, ethnographic, oral history types of things, certainly have ethical and moral overtones if you're getting students to engage in things like observation of people, interviews of people, these types of things. So all that is part of that. The second of the substructure, okay. The fact that the way we divide the curriculum into its content, and that that curriculum kind of remains in a silo, never the twain shall meet. When the truth is, when we teach science or math, we're also teaching history. And we teach history, we're teaching science and math, we're teaching philosophy, we're teaching, same with science and math and English, we're touching upon all these things possible. We're touching on the human condition in English. Whether we're speaking of Jane Eyre or we're speaking of Mark Twain, Huckleberry Finn, Hemingway, No Man in the Sea, Who the Bell Tolls, Son of Also. I mean, all these things, it could be, Faulkner or any of these in terms of literature. All have moral and ethical undertones. The other side of this is, and I think this is in some ways even more important, it's in our practice, how we organize groups. Do we always do homogeneous or do we do heterogeneous? Meaning, obviously, different skill levels. We should not be doing homogeneous groups all the time. They serve their purpose. Heterogeneous groups are also serve purpose. How do we allow students to group with their friends only? That's an issue. Do we mix our groups up over time? That would be important. You may not know all this from observing a single class, but there are ways you may encounter some of this. The big one for me is questioning strategies. Okay, I'm a big believer in wait time, and there are a lot of videos on wait time. If you find that you're having difficulty with that, a wait time is very simple. You ask a question, you allow some time to pass. The length of that time depends on the complexity of the answer. It's a simple answer, you can let 10 seconds go off. Sorry. If it's a sophisticated, higher level answer, you may need to wait for 20 to 30 seconds. Okay. And You need to, first of all, not let students blurt out answers. Second of all, ask, for hands to be raised. That way you kind of know the students that want to answer, but you also know the students that are reluctant. Develop strategies. Even in high school, you can use popsicle sticks with students' names so that you're calling upon students, not just the students that raise their hands, but also the students that aren't raising their hand. You've got to get them engaged. Okay. I just observed a lesson from an intern. Unfortunately, it was a video. Unfortunately, the video didn't show the students, which you're gonna have to deal with. But you could tell by the voice of the student responding, or that no more than 2 or 3 students responded. And it was the same 2 or 3. That's clearly an issue. So people are left unengaged. So that's an ethical question, right? They're there to get an education. Why are we going to leave them unengaged? We've got to find ways to engage students. One of the things I like, particularly for upper grades, is for students to have a notebook where you give them time to write down an answer. Okay, and you can see who's writing and who's not. Call on people, you can do all the other, ask a friend, try to extend the answer out by calling on other folks. All that's good practice. The other thing to watch out for is in that terms, and I have an experience. It happened to be a Catholic school. I was looking at an intern who'd been teaching for a while. It was a fairly large classroom. They were discussing where the red fern grows. And this teacher had a propensity. It was a diverse classroom. There were a few more females than males. But you could tell who her favorites were, I guess, because she called on a particular set of females. Most of them were white. A couple of black females, no black males were called on. Even when they wanted to answer the question, and a couple of white males were called on. And of course, this is a story, about hunting and an aspect of that. So these young men, it was a school in the river parishes, most of them engaged in hunting. Some of the females did as well. They were very much engaged and wanted to answer, and she didn't. And basically, I sat with her and pointed this out. She wasn't even aware. And the other thing to think about, you may think about yourself in this, is that most of us as teachers are either left-handed or right-handed in the way we look at our classroom. Okay, I'm left-handed, I look to the left. Okay, I'm very well aware of that, and I have to keep my gaze, across the classroom when I ask questions, because I tend to want to move to the left. Anyway, so that's, those are some of the big questions on the understructure of the curriculum. If a teacher doesn't use groups, why? That's another question. Is it just because they're uncomfortable? Well, why are they still uncomfortable? How long have they been teaching? So my intern that I just observed, I couldn't have observed it anyway, but he didn't use groups. He, in fact, 48-minute lecture. A class, he lectured for 40 minutes. Another no. Okay. Now, he did well. He knew his content. But that class really should have been more diverse in its strategies. Okay. I would also include that there should be in a class at least one activity that you would be considered metacognitive. So thinking about thinking kinds of activity. Because by thinking about thinking, that's how we begin to internalize our learning. Okay. Let me end with one other story. And I'm not sure how long we've been at this. I think I'm running longer than I like. It goes back to ceremonies and rituals. I was observing a student teacher. And I got there early, so it was the end of one class before the student teacher began to teach. And so it was somebody's birthday at the end of that class, some young man, and this was first grade. And so the supervising teacher called up the student, we'll call him little Johnny, and asked little Johnny in front of everybody, do you want, maybe he was 8, okay, or 9, I can't remember. Do you want 8 whacks or 8 kisses? Okay. And the little boy says, whacks. And the student teacher bent over to me and said, they always pick whacks. And he, in front of the class, the young boy bends over, grabs his ankles, and with the flat of her hand, waxing however many times, 8, 9 times. Okay. This is cringeworthy, clearly. The sexual overtones of that is tremendous, even for young children that don't really realize what that is. Luckily, that teacher was not, I'm not even sure if she lasted the year, quite frankly. And this was supposed to be an experienced teacher. So if you see something like that, you definitely, we need to have a chat about that. So that's, what I wanted to talk about, try to help you through this. If you have any questions, as always, please let me know and stay safe in the next few days.